It's harvest time. The wide, wide vale is warm with the gold of ripening grain. Brown men and women harvesting. They sing a merry strain. The rice leaves rustle as the wind roves by, but mute the stalks, hollow and ripe. If by chance I find an unbruised stem, I'd make for Pan a pipe. And now, the rising harvest moon reflects the gold of ripening grain. Pan pipes, harvesters sing, while cicadas wear the refrain.
We celebrate today the life of our dearly beloved Professor Dominador Ilio. He was a Renaissance man of his generation, poet, writer, engineer, educator, painter, guerrilla, and bridge player. A literary critic said of him, "He is a rare combination, an engineer, a teacher of hydraulics for decades, and a poet. He has a passion for bridge. Given a specific number of objects and a set of rules, the fun and the challenge rest in the permutations and combinations. No wonder he writes of Percival in Times Square, of St. John in Chicago, of Icarus in catechism class." Prof. Ilio was born to a farmer couple with 14 children on November 15, 1913, in Malinaw, Aklan. After finishing his elementary grades in Malinaw, he wanted to enter a seminary in Iloilo, but he ended up in a public high school in Capiz. Prof himself narrated how that happened, an event that was engineering's gain and the church's loss. The seminary told him and his father to return the following year because he was underage at 12. On the way back to Aklan, his father told him to take his high school in Rojas City, where he had a brother who was a teacher. He was placed in the last section because he was a late enrollee. When he topped the first grading test, the principal promptly transferred him to the first section. Prof. Ilio, in the tradition of products of the public educational system then, who moved from the periphery to the center, which was UP then, went to Manila and enrolled in a course in surveying at UP in 1933. He got his associate in surveying degree in 1935 and later bachelor's degrees in geodetic engineering and civil engineering in 1939. He obtained his MS in engineering degree from the Iowa State University in 1953. He probably found the academics of geodetic engineering and civil engineering not very difficult, because he still had time to join two fraternities, the Rizal Center Fraternity and in 1937 the Beta Epsilon Fraternity, to work as a literary editor of the Philippine Collegian and to write poems and short stories. His poems and short stories were first published in the Philippine Collegian, Diliman Review, and UP's Literary Apprentice, and later in national magazines and newspapers such as the Sunday Times magazine. In 1937, he was first published in a national magazine, Sunday Tribune, with a short story and was paid 20 pesos. He said he wrote short stories because poetry did not pay. Prof. Ilio served the College of Engineering for 70 years. He started as a student assistant in 1935 at the School of Surveying. After graduation in surveying, Prof. La Chica hired him as the instrument man in the consolidation survey of the UP property in Los Baños. GEs will certainly appreciate this report by Prof. Ilio of his work as surveyor of the property. For a traverse of 117 stations up and down the slopes of Mount Makiling, His error of closure was only 1.5 minutes of arc. Later that year, he went to Davao and worked at the construction of the Zaire Highway. The following year, he returned to UP to study for his GE and CE degrees. Again, he worked as student assistant with what he called a fabulous salary of 25 pesos to put him through school. After he obtained his degree in CE and GE in 1939, he joined the Faculty of Geodetic Engineering. When the Japanese invaded the Philippines, Prof. Ilio did not think twice about joining the anti-Japanese war guerrillas in his island of Panay. He worked at the headquarters S3 in plans and training under Colonel Macario Peralta. He rose to the rank of captain when war ended. While serving in the guerrilla units, he wrote a lot of poems and stories. These were scribbled in between the formulation of combat orders, writing of combat reports, and accounting of logistical data on arms and ammunition. 18 war stories were woven into his novel, State of War. This won an honorable mention in the UP College Jubilee Literary Contest in 1958. One of the poems written during the war, Camp Agsasaging, was included in the public high school textbook Philippine Prose and Poetry.
Wind-swept reeds, a winding river, cool mornings, orchids and bird songs. Sunlight a-dancing on a slope of yellowing corn. Soft shadows reposed on exposed roots of naga trees. Here, where prodigious nature showers bounties and figs, are huts of the signs of raids, ambuscades, and things.
After the war, Prof. Ilio resumed teaching at the Department of Mechanics and Drawing. He became the head of the Engineering Sciences Department, serving there for 12 years. In 1950, he was sent to Iowa State University as a fellow for hydraulics, obtaining a degree in MS Engineering. When he returned to UP in 1953, the college started a semi-technical quarterly publication of the faculty and students, the UP Engineer, with Prof. Ilio as the editor. The inaugural issue was put out in August 1953. The following year, he became college secretary, working with Dean Crisostomo Ortigas. Even as he was teaching engineering subjects in UP, Prof. Ilio was furiously writing and had a prolific output of literary works. His poem, The Filipino Youth, won the 1948 Republic Poetry Award. In the 50s, 7 of his poems were included in the book of anthology by Leonard Casper, titled Six Filipino Poets. While studying for his master's in hydraulics at the Iowa State University in the early 1950s, Paul Engel, director of the world-renowned creative writing workshop, accepted him as a fellow. There he learned more about the art of poetry.
We have proclaimed martial law in accordance with the powers vested in the President by the Constitution of the Philippines.
When Marcos declared martial law in September 1972, Prof. Ilio was caught in the first wave of arrests. In a reverse application of a saying, the sins of his activist son, Dominador Jr., were visited on his father. That explains his arrest and detention in the first week of December. But he felt at home at the Camp Crame stockade because many of the detainees were fellow UP faculty and students. 1 or 2 fraternity brothers who were in the military got him released on New Year's Eve of 1972. Of that release, his good friend Dr. Silvia Claudio Estrada wrote, "When he was released from prison during martial law, he went home to our house immediately. He said to my mother, 'Rita, feed me. I am so hungry for good food.' I still cannot forget the scene. My mom threw her arms around him. She was so happy to see him." While in prison, Prof. Ilio wrote some poems, some of which were included in the book The Collected Poems of Dominador Ilio. The Beta Epsilon Fraternity and the UP Alumni Engineers are 2 college organizations dear to the heart of Prof. Ilio. He joined the Beta Epsilon in 1937 and was very active in his many activities and projects, becoming the Secretary for Life of the Beta Epsilon Alumni Inc. He earned the title of Mr. Beta Epsilon. The annual Dominador Ilio Award for Outstanding Engineering graduates was put up in his honor. He worked well with others, one of his closest friends being the late Professor Christy Hernandez, a Tau Alpha stalwart and colleague in the college for decades. He was also very active in the activities of the UP Alumni Engineers. He was one of the original incorporators in 1954 and served as its executive director for life for 51 years. He was also the perennial editor of its annual yearbook. In 1977, he was chosen as the most distinguished engineering alumnus of the college. In 2004, the UPAE recognized his 50 years of service to the organization. In 1978, Prof. Ilio retired from UP. 2 years later, he could not refuse a friend and accepted the position as Dean of Engineering of Laguna College. While working there, he continued writing and started compiling his literary works in books such as the collected poems of Dominador Ilio, Guerrilla Memoirs, Madyaas, Tales and Legends in Verse, The Katipunan of Aklan, and Vagaries of a Wild Boar. Emino Abad included his works in the book Man of Faith and its sequel, A Native Clearing. His works are also in Nick Carbo's anthology, Returning a Borrowed Tongue, a collection of Filipino poetry in English, published by Coffee House Press, 1995. Prof. Ilio lived as he had planned under his own philosophy, which he summed up in his poem written in 1947, 3 years after his patriotic work in the anti-Japanese war.
So I shall be strong and clean and vigilant ever. Follies and privations in youth are baneful, for they visit vengeance in one's age like a curse. And liberty and life is a faith and trust unto the last spark of life. What good is there in a man, though living, who is dead to action? I do not want to stand a living dead, nor simply die for my country. I want to dedicate a full life, not dedicate a death. For when the ship of world state be imperiled on its course by insidious mutiny, I shall be strong and courageous to share in the quarrel to preserve the peace and brotherhood.
During a family get-together in Malinaw last December 2003, our beloved Prof. Ilio sang, with his family and grandchildren, the patriotic anthem Bayan Ko. This will not be the last time that we will hear from Prof. Ilio. The Renaissance man with a Pentium mind and eidetic memory, combined with a kind and sensitive heart, that served him well as poet, writer, engineer, educator, painter, guerrilla, and bridge player. This is because his numerous writings will be collected and published. With the Ilio publications, we will continue to celebrate his full life as well as his works, learning from them as well as taking pleasure in reading them. We salute you, Prof. Dom Ilio.